Hi everyone, welcome to session 2AR, ISPF Masterclass, edit from A to ZLAST. And very privileged to have Dan Dirksey. Just going to wait one more minute before we go. If anyone wants to ask questions during the presentation, please feel free to type them in the chat and we'll pick them up. We'll moderate the session and make sure all your questions get answered. It's always a good sign, Dan, when I have to use my mouse to scroll up and down the attendees list. Well done. Okay, go on then, Dan. Off you go. Have a good one.
All right, thank you. Welcome, everybody. This is the first of two master classes I'm doing this week, one on edit, and next week at the same time, it will be edit macros. So if you haven't already donated to the charity, got your raffle tickets, please do. But do save those nice binoculars for me. Here are the two sessions that we're going to be going over this conference. So let's get started. So ever since early man first discovered tools, there's always been something that gets in our way of using them, finding the time to learn about them. So whether you consider computing an art or a craft or a science, you need to know your tools and how to use them. So thank you for taking the time this afternoon to understand more about my and hopefully your favorite tool, ISPF editor.
Dan, do you have a mobile phone or something near your microphone? Because there's some polling sort of noises.
Oh, I don't.
Oh, okay.
Better or?
No, every time you talk, there's a little bit of interference.
All right, so even though I'm from Michigan, which is the home of the Ford Motor Company, we're not going to be taking the Model A. It's touted as a high-speed tour. I decided when I put this together that I'd be covering everything about the editor, all the line commands, primary commands. Some of them we're just going to touch on real quickly, and we'll dive into things that are relatively new. So along the way, we'll be focusing on some of the little things. When I used to give this presentation in person, I'd have a large bag of Smarties to reward those with correct answers to my questions. Instead of virtual candy, in an effort to boost my session evaluation, a little different this time. So first off, semicolon. The script preparation before we get
Dan, sorry, can I interrupt you? That you know, we as participants, we just can't hear you. There's so much interference. Would you be able to see if you can get closer to the microphone, or?
I actually have a lavalier mic on. Is that better there?
No, it's every time you talk. It's definitely noise cancelling when you're not talking, but as soon as you're talking, there's this constant buzzing, and it's making your voice fade in and out. Do you have another microphone on the laptop?
I do. I just switched that. Let me check real quick here some of the options. But,
thanks.
Well, let's.
We should be at the normal one now. Is that any better?
Oh man, that is crystal clear. Thank you very much.
Okay, we will skip that for next time as well. All right, let's get back to where we were. All right, so you might most likely be using the semicolon for a stacking character. If you do, you'll have to use that if you ever want to search for stacking character, but you can connect commands together so you keep your train of thought. Let's talk briefly about PF keys. In the beginning, there were just PF keys. There was no such thing as a key list. I still use key list off. You might do something different, but in any case, you use keys command to get to those PF key settings. So there's my PF keys. These are pretty much the standard ones that you'll want to keep the same. But I'd like to talk about some of the other ones in a minute. ISPF now supports up to 32 split screens. By default, out of the box, it's 8, but it can be configured up to 32. I used to have split new as my F2, but now I use start, which brings up a full screen split screen. It's not split, I guess, at that point. Another session. I use split to keep around in case I do want to split 2 screens onto the same screen. Swap next can be used to go around your queue in a round robin fashion of the screens that are open. And swap list will bring up the list of the screens that are open and let you point and shoot to get after those. Here's a couple other ones. F12 originally was cursor, which would just bring you to the command line. Then retrieve was added, and C retrieve is a merge of those two. So if you're in the data, it will bring you to the command line, and otherwise it will do a retrieve. And ret P is the retrieve panel. And let's show a couple of those things here. This is a swap list. If you hit that key, and you can do point and shoot against these fields here. And this is the retrieve panel, which allows you to point and shoot. Here's the list of things in your stack, and you can then point and shoot and bring that up. There's also a couple options to set the minimum number of characters. I have mine set at 4, and then you can select whether or not the cursor position is at the end or beginning of your retrieve line. You're now able to start up ISPF and have multiple screens come up automatically. And the way that is done with the ZStart profile variable, you set that in dialog test, and option 3 is the variables. And this is going to start ISPF, go to option 2, start a new session with 3.4, another one with option 6, another one with SDSF, sorry about that, and then swap back to 3.4. You can use the swap bar command to bring up a list of those on the bottom as point and shoots. And that example, then starting up with that, this is how I first come up. And you can just point and shoot to go to the other ones that are available. One thing you might check into, depending on your emulator, some of them allow you to set the scroll wheel to F7 and F8 and the right mouse button to F3. And that really helps, especially in point and shoot, to fly around these screens. You can set up other ones other than just ZStart. You can name them whatever you want, and you can start up different environments, if you will. With all those with all those sessions that you can open, there's now an equal X all command that will close all the ISPF screens at one shot and bring you back to TSO ready. All right, let's get started here. So when I go into the editor for anything other than a trivial change, I kind of treat it as a mini design session and figure out what's the best approach to take. But that only works if you understand all the capabilities of your tool. And so this is our starting point here, is going to be the getting started with the editor, how to start it up. We'll talk about line commands, primary commands, and edit macros. All right, first the edit entry panel, option 2, different sections on this screen. The first section there is the library section. It allows up to 4 partition data sets to be allocated and concatenated, but the first and third are common qualifiers, and the second qualifier then is your different levels, if you will. Anytime you do a concatenation, anything you edit and save will go into the first data set. You can use member patterns. Instead of just bringing up a member list, you can minimize that by using either percent signs or splats, asterisks. This next section is the other. And before we go into that, I'd like to talk about the closing parent and closing quote. Those have not been necessary for a couple of decades now, but a lot of folks don't know that. So you can skip those characters on any ISPF screen. If you are a dialogue manager writer, a dialogue writer, you can use these verification statements instead of a normal DS name to have that feature kicked in. So anytime you don't have a quoted data set, it's going to do your TSO prefix, assuming you're not running without a prefix. You can use that for sequential data sets and PDSs, but also VSAM files if you have a VSAM editor installed and it's configured in the configuration file. You can also specify a ZOS Unix file here. If you start with any of these characters, then it will assume that you have a Unix file there, and you can use left and right scrolling if you have a very long name. Autotype can be used to bring up, save you some time in both the library area and the other data set name, and as well in 3.4. If you set autotype to a PF key and you start typing a partial data set name or member, it will let you find the next one automatically. So here I just started with my prefix, hit autotype, brings the next one up, and I keep hitting until I get the one I want. This next section, the next time I present this, this panel will look different because starting in version 2.5, this feature is going away, unfortunately. It had some security issues, but what it allows you to do is edit PC files with the ISPF editor. You can edit mainframe data sets with a PC editor and manage the file transfer between that. I always consider this kind of the silver bullet for folks getting to Zoe, but unfortunately, it's going away. This next section is different options. The first one there is you can set up an initial macro. That'll be run before you display any data. You can run a different profile. See if I'm missing my mouse here. There we go. Format can be used in conjunction with the 3.11. It was originally set up for double bit by character set data, but it's very helpful you can define different columns, if you will, in the data, different fields, and the editor will maintain those. I've used that for users going into the editor to keep them only in the areas that they're supposed to be. Oh, let me go back one here. I'm going to try. Another one here I want to point out is line command table. And now ISPF supports line command edit macros, and I'll show you an example of that later here. This next section is various switches. This one, edit on workstation, will be going away soon. ISPF now supports ASCII and UTF-8 data and not just EBCDIC. So now that we've gone over the edit entry panel, I'll let you know I hardly ever use it. As a great philosopher, Yogi Berra once said, when you come to a fork in the road, take it. So I usually do. I usually go either through 3.4 or I'll use the edit service. So first up, 3.4. I just want to point out that use the E line command, but in all commands in 3.4, you can use the slash to represent the data set name. And so in this case, it will bring up a member list of only the members that start with GE in my member list. Okay, but the real speed is the edit service. Another Guinness opportunity. Who knows what happens if you enter TSO edit on a command line? You do not get the ISPF editor. what you'll get is the TSO line editor, which is very much like DOS Edlin. If you do accidentally fall into that, here's what you do to get out of that. It can be used for simple batch editing, however. At my site, for simple types things, there are some jobs that use that. Anything more complicated, we'll use the ISPF editor running in batch. This is how you call the ISPF services from Rex and ZLAST, and you can use the edit model command to get lots of different examples. So here's a simple exec that edits members of my JCL library. The main things here to look at, we're going to be running in the ISP exec address space. And then if a member name is provided, then I'll use this format, and otherwise it uses this format. And it's just a fast way of bringing up the editor. The ePDF command now, however, is in the command table. So from any command line, you can do a command like this to do the same kind of thing that this exec does. And it handles browses of Unix files as well. Browse, view, or edit. So you just add a V or B if you want to use the view or browse instead. And it accepts other options. One that's missing, however, is the line command table for line macros. So I still tend to use my CLS, my execs for that type of thing. ISRE PDF, which is the command for that, it can be run actually from TSO ready, which will start an ISPF session with edit only. Doesn't allow you to do any splits off of that. And then when you come back, it automatically comes back to TSO ready. Now, sometimes you don't want to edit just a single data set. You might want to edit a concatenation. Here's an example of using the libraries. So my common qualifiers are DND and exec, and I have 4 different libraries within that group. And I want to edit all 4 of those data sets at one time. So for something like this, for a concatenation, you have to use the Elementet service to associate this data ID as a handle to this group of data sets. And once that's established, then you just edit that data ID with or without the member. If you don't have a member, it will still just bring up the member list. Lastly, you might not be doing a library. Maybe you have, you can have up to 16 data sets that can concatenate together. And you first then allocate that to a DD name, and then your Elementet assigns the data ID to the DD name. And from then on, it's still the same. You just need to also free the DD name after you're done. Okay, one other little small thing. The percent sign.
Hang on.
Yep.
So where you did those LM inits on the slide before that one, where it was the 4
Yep.
Middle qualifiers, the one before this.
Okay.
And then you did edit member. Yeah. What happened? It just picks up the first one in the concatenation, does it?
Yeah, when you bring up a concatenation, it will show what library level it's at. So if it's at, for example, my staging library, it'll show that as number 3 in the list as a library. And then again, if you save it, it's going to go into the dev one. Clear as mud?
Yeah, you can just hear a little explosion. That's blown my mind. If anyone else has got any questions, just put your hand up and I'll unmute you, because this is just fascinating. Great stuff.
Yeah, I do have a full time here. We should have some time at the end. So probably better to save them toward the end there, so I can make sure I get all through this. So back to the percent sign, that's used to, I'm having problems with my mouse here. There we go. Percent sign, you can prefix that over a command, and it won't go and run a TSO command. It will go just to your sysexec and exec and sysproc libraries. It's really helpful for dialog management from a menu. You also don't get the little splats at the bottom for line mode. All right, the EdRec service, when you, those simple examples I had, I did not include edit recovery. By default, unlike option 2, which will bring up edit recovery if necessary, you have to actually call the EdRec service to do that. Now the ePDF command, that does support edit recovery automatically. All right, we're on to line commands. First, let's go over the screen here, different areas. Obviously, we've got what we're editing, the version and modification level you're running, and the current columns. Next is your command line. This can be at the bottom if you've set that up in the ISPF settings. It's where you put primary commands and edit macros to run. The scroll amount, I always use cursor, which is like page, but if I'm in the data somewhere and hit it, it'll just bring that line to the top. I mentioned you have page. There's also half data, which is 1 minus page. And you can also, if you're editing data that's like in blocks of 10, you can actually just set that to a scroll amount of 10 and then go through those blocks. This is the line command area. And finally, where the data lives. Now, there's various ways to increase the real estate so you maximize how many lines you can edit at a single time. You can change the terminal model that you're using. I'm using a mod 2 here just to make it large. You can turn off the split line if necessary, and that's done by the ISPF settings. You can turn PF show off if you've got those on. The edit set and ed set command or ed set command can be used to remove the action bars on the top. And you can turn off the swap bar divider line or obviously turn off swap bar completely. So this is the most you can get on a mod 2 right now. Before we go too far into line commands, I want to kind of take a little detour onto the profiles. So if you type profile 9, you'll get all the profile information as well as these other 4 lines here. And profiles are maintained based on the type of the data, the last qualifier, and the size. And you can set up a profile called Z default, if you will. If you set that up and set your initial settings, then anytime you have a new profile that's created, it will use Z default as the basis for that. By default, there are 25 profiles that are maintained, and that's done on a least recently used basis. So if you haven't used one for a while, you risk it dropping off. You can lock a profile. So for your common ones, you can lock them and they won't be popped off. And this number 25 is configurable. I run at 50 right now. And you can also set up configuration options for defaulting different things. Okay, on to the line commands. So there are different formats of the line commands. You can have a single format where you're just specifying the command D, R, whatever. Some of them will accept a numeric suffix. Some of them have block formats, and some have block formats with a suffix. So if you use RR block with a 3, you'll get 3 groups of that repeated. Now, the line command area, the way ISPF determines what command you've entered is a combination of backscanning and the cursor position. So let's give some examples here. I've just blanked them out here. Obviously, you don't have to blank out all of them. I just want them to pop out. It is a good idea sometimes to just put a blank after it. And there are some caveats here. Here I have a D3 that I've typed. Again, it uses cursor position. So if you happen to cursor over 2 positions, it will see that as D315. If you hit the delete key and shift these over, then it will become D3500. So just be aware of how it does its tricks. Here's the results of all that. All right, copy and move. You can copy single lines or group of lines or blocks of lines, either after or before. After and before actually do take suffixes as well. So if you want 3 copies of that block copied, you can use that format. Overlay is a little different. Here's an example of overlaying. I use this quite frequently. Here's a list of DB2 tables, and I want to include them into an in clause. So I have my list that I've copied, and what I want to do is I want to copy these characters over this. And so that is a result of that. I used a move overlay. After a couple more keystrokes and a text flow, it looks nice and pretty. All right, not too long ago, they added the K versions of the A, B, and O, and that allows for multiple targets. Again, I have an example. So here we have, we're going to copy, and we're going to want it after this line, but we want to keep going. And before this line twice and keep going, and finally the final after. And same example here for move. The key is that wherever every target you want to keep going, you keep the K on, and the final one you use A or B. So here's the results of all those commands. ISPF supports 2 different kinds of shifting. The column shift is a destructive shift. The data shift is a non-destructive. You use either parentheses or the greater and less than for those type of things. By default, if you don't include a number, it will default to 2 positions. And this is affected by the bounds. We'll talk about bounds a little bit later, but if you've set bounds up, that's the only thing that will shift. So here's an example, some Rex code that is identical. I'm going to shift one with the column shift and one with the data shift. See the difference? In the column shift, it's thrown everything off the rest of the screen here into the bit bucket. And in the data shift, it's given me this warning that it was incomplete. It didn't lose any data. It shifted it as far as it can. Also, anything on the left boundary will stay locked. Excluded lines can be used for a number of reasons. You can use the line commands to exclude a block. Maybe you want your variable definitions right next to the code or whatever. You can use those to exclude individual lines. And if you want to pop some of them back, you can use the F and L to unexclude either the first or the last line. The S command can be used as to show a structure. I'll show that in a second here. And a key thing to remember for excluded line is it's treated as a single line. So if you've excluded 20 lines and you just have the dashes there and put a D on that excluded line, you'll delete all 20 of them. So here's an example of the S line command. So I'd like to see just the structure. I have 12 lines done here, and it pops out from left to right the different indentation levels. So as long as you do do's and ends the proper way, like I do, then you'll get these results. Okay, there are a number of text commands in the editor. Text entry allows you to do a TE and get a full screen of just typing. You don't have a line command area. It's just straight on. You keep typing. If you get to the end of a line, it will word wrap automatically, and then text flow it together when you hit enter. Text splitting can be used to split something at a cursor location. And text flow you can use to bring words together, paragraphs together. There are upper and lowercase commands now as well. When you're using text flow, it will keep on going until it reaches a blank line or a change of indentation. That's how it knows to stop. So here's some Latin to practice on. I'm going to do a text flow to 40 characters. So it knows the word boundaries and then flows that in within there. There's some data commands. The make data line command can be used to change unreal lines into real lines, okay? So it might be some messages or notes or information lines that you want to keep around. I'll frequently use it for the columns line command, where I'll bring up the columns line command, do an MD on it to change it, and then do a column shift to shift it over to where I'm trying to count things. It's also very handy for after a compare, and I'll show that later. The HX line command will display hex mode for just a single line or a group of lines, and it's a toggle, either on or off. It only shows vertical format, but this is an example of that. I have some lines here. I turned HX only for that line. It displays it in vertical mode, meaning this is a 0, 0, 0, 1, 0, 2. I want to point out that you can change this down here. So I changed the 0, 4 to a Charlie 4, and I end up with a D. There are a number of miscellaneous line commands. The, see if I can get rid of that. There we go. The bounds command I mentioned before, it will bring up a left and right, or less than and greater than sign, and you can overtype that line to set the different bounds. There's also a bounds primary command that you can just directly say, I want these columns. The columns command, and then the mask command, if you want to have a set of characters always to be put in the same spot. For example, maybe you're doing a subassembler and you want a comment area on the right side. You can set up your mask area, a mask line, and every time you insert a line, you get that mask. The tabs line, I'll give you an example later. There's lots of different ways to do tabbing. All right. In the context of PF keys, we have the colon. This little guy can be used, I always call them PF key macros. They're not true edit macros. But by using the colon, you can prefix line commands and use them in PF keys. So text split is a very common one. Instead of typing TS at the line command area and then cursoring over 70 columns, you can then just go to that column you want to split at, hit your PF key, it will enter the TS in the line command area and split the line. This one you can use if you want to copy the same member multiple times, and then go to the next thing you're looking for, kind of walking through areas of where you want to copy. And this is a real one that I did one time. It's I'm not going to go through it, but it worked great for the time I needed it. Okay, also in the context of the line command, the period or dot is used for labels. And these are kind of the unsung heroes. And not as many people use these as should. So on any line, you can label a line with a dot followed by any alphabetical character except for Z, that's reserved. So maybe you have a working storage, whatever you want to name this. My favorites are probably A and B. There are a couple built-in ones. That is ZF and ZL or .ZLAST. And that represents the first data line and the last data line. And generally for macro writing, you can also use Z cursor, which is where the cursor is currently positioned. And labels can be used for lots of different commands. And I'll show those as well in a bit. These are all primary commands. One I'd like to point out, you can use submit with labels. So if you just want to do .zf, the first line to some .a or something like that, you can do that. Even better though, now submit can be used with NX or X, excluded lines. So frequently if I have something, I will exclude the things I don't want and then just submit the job with NX. Okay, we're on to primary commands. So the command processor for ISPF, compared to many others, is a thing of beauty. It always lets you use any combination of characters in any order, any of the parameters. It is pretty smart about finding the things that it gets confused about. If you have embedded blanks, for example, or commas, then you have to put quotes or double quotes around it. And it accepts synonyms such as F instead of typing find. There is a Z expand command now. I believe they set up that for F4 and F16 by default. I'm not a real fan of it. It has some issues, but you can use that for long primary commands. So if for primary commands, if you're going to pick anything to know inside and out, it would be these three. If you know these inside and out, you'll be ways ahead of the average user in what you can do. And especially these are very helpful when you're writing macros, knowing all the capabilities of what it can do. So here are some different examples of find. Simple ones like find ABC. Other ones here are a little bit more involved, but take a look at these later and see if you understand what all of them are. These might be new to you. These are actually regular expressions from Unix. This one, for example, finds anything with DSN or DS name, for example, followed by disposition equal on the same line. This one is also handy in JCL. You can do an XAll and then run this command, and it will pop out all the conditional logic of your steps. And this last one here actually will find valid member names. So specifying the search string, you can just type ABC, and in that case, it will find any combination of upper lowercase for that string. You can delimit strings if you have blanks or commas or asterisks in there. You can use character strings to say, I only want exactly these characters. So you use either a C or on the beginning or the end to indicate that it's a character string. Likewise, you use an X for hex strings. Again, this is if you're looking for semicolons, but then you can create any even number of characters for a particular hex string you're looking for. Picture strings are wildcarding ones, as are regular expressions. Regular expressions have much more capability than picture strings, but you pay a price. There's a learning curve for regular expressions. And lastly, the asterisk there represents the last search string. So here's how I generally do things when I have to change something that's long. I'll find the first thing, and then I will change splat, which represents the find string, to a different string. And there's the result of that. So picture strings, there are various characters that are wildcards for groups of characters. So this thing down here will find anything where 3 alphabetic characters are followed by 3 numbers. And you can use these other ones to specify other things. I frequently use equal and non-blank characters when I'm writing edit macros. The dot you've probably seen many times in browse when you have invalid characters or undisplayable characters. Upper and lowercase you can search for, and those two are special that they can also be used as a target. So you can change them like lowercase characters to uppercase characters with a change. So here are some of the things for regular expressions. I'll point you at this website here. It goes through and gives you some good examples. I've kind of documented what some of these are. There are more than this. And for the most part, ISPF supports everything out there. There are a few that it doesn't support. But generally, you can get by very well. So you can slice and dice the data a little bit. If you only want to look at certain columns, you can give a column range or a certain column. You can specify the labels. So you only want to look from these 2 lines to another line. And you can only look for exclude status or non-exclude status. Look for things on those lines. You can determine the direction you want to look or all. You can also limit the strings based on if it's a word or if it's a suffix you're looking for or a prefix that you're looking for. And once you know find, you pretty much know exclude and change. The only difference for exclude is you can't use NX or X because obviously that's what you're doing. And for change, it's all identical except you have to supply a target string. The rfind and rchange PF keys can be used to kind of step through data. You can do a change AB, and instead of pressing enter, if you press F5, it will find the first one but not change it. And then you can jump between, skip over ones with F5 and then change F6 when you're happy. The locate primary command can be used to find a number of things, a single line or a certain label that you've put out there. One I use frequently is if I'm editing a large data set and I start doing a copy and forget what I was copying or got a call, I can use the L and type L command, and it will show me the first line command that it finds. Likewise, the reset command, if you determine you don't want to do that copy, you can reset all line commands. You can reset lots of other things, excluded lines, all these above. And there's lots of other things. You can reset labels. We'll talk about some of these other guys here. And you can do a whole bunch at once. Flip and hide are for working with excluded lines. So here I've done an XAll and find all A, and it's popped out all the A's. When I do a flip, I get just the opposite. It hides all the A's and shows me everything else. And hide X can now be used to hide those dash lines. So instead of having the dash lines, now you just have these little underscores under these numbers, and that's where the excluded lines are. But this is very handy for cutting out text, for example, that you want to copy somewhere without all those dash lines in there. So there's a delete primary command. You can delete all excluded or non-excluded lines, and you can use a range to do that as well, a range of labels. The sort command allows up to 5 column ranges with an optional direction. If you include one direction on one, you have to include them on all. So you have to put them all there. You can use the labels on a sort to manage that. You can also use exclude and non-exclude status. One thing to watch out for again is the bounds. If you have set up bounds, for example, for 20 to 40, and you're sorting within that, it will only affect those columns 20 and 40. Things outside the bounds, left and right, will remain as they were. And that might be what you want, but it might not be what you want. There's recursive edit, view, and browse from here, and you can include member names and patterns for each of those. Okay, I'm hoping that I'm not the only one that ever makes mistakes. Years ago, we added the undo command, and it initially started with having to have recovery turned on. That is the default way. So normal recovery processing is to we take a copy of the whole data and then log every change. And for undo, it will play back everything except that last change. You can now set up a configuration entry to use internal storage instead of the recovery data set. And there's some various options there for using that. By and large, compare, other than find, change, and exclude, it's probably my favorite command. Compare uses super C to compare what's in the editor to a different data set, Unix file, all of these different things you can compare to. And if you're editing in a concatenation, it will compare what you have to the next one in the concatenation. So if you change something or want to look what's the difference between this development level and the production level, it will show those changes. So here's a quick example. I have a member Jenner and also Jenner2. I'm going to compare Jenner2 to Jenner, and it's going to show me the differences here. Anything with equal signs here is in the other data set. This is an information line, and so it only exists in the other data set. So here, this is kind of a paired change. this one here only exists in the new data set, and this one only exists in the other data set. There's the X parameter, which you can use either in your initial one, or you can do it after you've done a compare. You can say comp X, and it will then show you only the differences here. So this pops out. I see everything that's changed. In this situation, I'm using 0 context lines, and we'll show you where you set that up. And here's an example of 1 context line. It just gives you a feel for where things exist. Okay, another opportunity for a Guinness. In the context of the compare command, the asterisk or splat, I probably use that more than half the times when I use compare. So it compares the current edit session to the data that's stored on disk. Oh, jumped ahead here, sorry. Oh, crazy. You can also, I mentioned earlier when we talked about the MD line command, you can use it for selective undo. So here's an example. I'm doing compare splat, and it's showing me the differences. Now, the first thing I did when I, excuse me, went into the edit session was I deleted this step. And then I've been editing for the next half an hour and made hundreds of other changes, but I'd like to bring this one back. Now, if I used undo, I would have to pop everything back from the bottom or cancel out and start over. But I can use MD8 to change these information lines into real boys. So now that's incorporated back into my data set. This is also helpful for merging changes from different levels or different changes that were made by different people. You can merge them into one. Compare has lots of different other parameters. It is Super C under the covers, so Super C has gobs of options. You can use the comp command by itself, however, to bring up the compare settings. This is where you set those number of excluded lines, the context lines, when you use comp X. And you can change other things here, and you go wild. There's data sets that you can save, and again, many options. The highlight command has many options as well. However, generally, you're just going to type hi and get to the edit color settings screen, which lets you define the language and what you want to color. So here's an example. We're using all those things turned on. This I've just done a find an O call, so it's popped those out. My do's are color coded based on the number, the indentation level, or not. I'm sorry, not the indentation level, but the actual structures. If is the same way. I have parenthesis matching turned on, so that's very helpful. This works over multiple lines, like for SQL, it's very nice. And for JCL now, anything that's shouldn't be lowercase is caught with a nice pink reverse video. Now there are times that you want to get data in and out of the editor, and you use the external data commands for that. Create and replace. By default, you can use the C line commands or M line commands to do that, but you can also use a label range. And generally, I'll use label ranges now. This will create a new mem called new mem from the first line to the label that I've named .a. And you can create into an existing PDS or a new PDS or a new sequential data set now. Same thing with replace. So in this case, I'm using those built-in .zf and .zl. So it's going to take everything instead of doing the C9999 and then realizing you got more than that number of lines there. This will make sure you get the full member copied to this new one. And since it's a new data set, it will pop up and ask if you want to allocate it with the same attributes as the source data set or specify your own. Okay, going the other direction, if you want to copy things in, use copy and move, again with the A and B line commands, but you can also use labels by specifying after or before. So here I'm going to do a copy of member $, before the first line. And here I'm going to copy even a Unix file. And move works the same way. The other external data command is the cut and paste. Cut works a little bit different. You can just say cut and it will cut the entire thing. Otherwise, you can use line commands or label ranges. You can also use X or NX to show those. By default, cut will append, so you keep on building up the clipboard, and you can use R to replace the clipboard. I'll show you an example of the display here in a second. Paste goes the other way. You can keep the data in the clipboard if you want to do it multiple times. There is no AK or BK, and it does not accept suffixes like the other one. So here I'm going to grab some lines and cut to the C1 clipboard and do a cut display. It shows that I'm not using the default clipboard, I'm using C1. You can have 10 other clipboards, so 11 total. This is a write-up that Lionel Dyke and Bill Smith did several years ago about the clipboards. Lionel has a tool called Set Clip that you can grab off the CBT tape. You did a video onto the ZTools channel as well. But it allows you to maintain clipboards over ISPF sessions. So you can keep them around if you want the same clipboard over and over. The edit set or ed set command will bring up these different edit settings. You can set your default cut and paste here. Also, you can set an initial edit macro that runs before the other initial edit macro. Some people use cows here, and that will keep a comms line on the top of their screen for everything they edit. The model command, as I mentioned before, gives examples of ISPF dialog services. And for example, model edit gives you all the different flavors of using edit. We touched on the edit profiles. There are a number of different things up there. One of them is number. You can turn that on. This affects your sequence numbers. You can do renum and unnum as other commands, turn caps on and off. Hex can be either turned on by default vertical and otherwise data. I'll show you a quick example. Nulls changes blanks to null characters, so you can use the insert and insert over on a line. And the notes on or off turns off model notes. Here's the difference between vertical, again, the default hex mode, and hex data. So here you have them on top of each other, and with hex data, it's stretched out this way. That's nice if you want to grab a hex string and cut it out. Edit profiles, we have different tabbing that you can do. There's different types of tabbing. The mask line, these other ones I've talked before. Everybody uses software tabbing when you just press enter and it does a smart thing back based on indentation, but you can use that with a tabs line. Here I've set up a tabs line. Every word that I type and hit enter, it automatically skips over there. I can also do hardware tabbing using this character, and then my tab key actually will skip over there, and you can use those two in conjunction. And you can also define a tab character. And in that case, again, with hardware tabbing, wherever you put a slash, it will do a tab. So it actually will stretch it off over multiple lines, again, using the hardware tabbing. There are a number of commands that are affected by the bounds. You need to be aware of those. There are different termination options that you can use. Pack, you can turn that off as a configuration option now. You can set version and levels of your members. Save now supports new gen and no gen for PDSE member version 2 member generations. And these other options are for the different types of, if you're doing ASCII, you can do that. Submit, by the way, you can be done from browse, but you can also now use the subsystem parameter to get it to a different environment. That's a version 2.5. If you use SCLM for library management, there are different flavors of these commands for editing there. And ampersand can be used to retain something on a command line. So I'll give you this example in a second, but if you want to copy the same member multiple times or narrow down data. So here I'm changing the commas to space comma, and I'm doing it for a certain column range. And I just keep on hitting enter. The command stays on there. I keep on hitting till I get what I want. And then I change my columns and I do the next one. Edif, VIF, and BRIF are browse interface services. You have to use a program language, not an interpreted language for these. You provide the read and write routines. That's how SDSF does SB, SE, and SJ, their line commands. DDList or TSO ISR DDN is another way to get to the editor. You can use the E line command and do just a single or a full concatenation. Okay, we're going to go quickly through edit macros. What did I do? There we go. Okay, edit macros are ISPF dialogues that run and edit and view. So you can do everything else that dialogues normally can do, but you can also get at the data, run primary commands and line command functions. So here are some quick examples. Steps, I want to just see the steps that are shown, and I want to use hide X to just do those. Here's another one kind of based on what I did earlier, but this was all automatic. By default, it looks for a delimiter of semicolon and automatically separates out those columns. Line command macros are now supported. You trigger them by entering a line command. There is some additional setup that's necessary. Again, next week's macro command, I'll spend a lot more time and not quite the same speed going over edit macros. Here's an example of a do line command. So this is used to just wrap a do indented where I wanted to go and wrap the do and end around it. There are a variety of things that are macro related only. These are other commands that can be used. You can run edit the ISPF editor in batch. You allocate your DDs, run TSO command processor with a statement like this. The thing you have to remember, you can use you'll have to use an initial edit macro, and you have to either end or cancel. You can't actually display it even in batch. A little advertising here on file 1000 of CBT tape. I have an edit macro change facility that lets you run an edit macro either of your own or there's some built-in ones against multiple data sets. And there's full help text available. Again, that's file 1000 if you're interested. And lastly, we have the configuration options that are available. That's the end of the show. Please do your session feedback if you would. And we have a few minutes to take questions. Sorry, we went a little bit late here. So let's see what we can do here. Okay, that one. Sorry about the sound.
Don't worry about that. I think you've more than made up for it, Dan.
Okay.
Michael Carey, along with me, is blown away with this presentation. Truly invaluable ISPF workshop. This was a mind-blowing master ISPF session. You've saved me years of ignorance. Thank you, Dan.
All right, very good. Well, I appreciate you putting your session evaluation in and giving me some good words. I'd like to come visit you in person sometime in the future here. So you can convince my treasurer/wife. Be a great thing.
Hey, Mark Falconer. Yeah, it is a life-changing presentation. Some of those DB2 Rexes of yours or edit macros are going to get updated, right? Do you have your last slide that's got the session reminder? Was it 2AF?
Yeah, 2A. You mean the other guy here? Let's go.
Another pint of Guinness.
I'm trying. Yeah, another pint of Guinness for questions. But it looks like I've got either
2AR. Right, there we go.
There we go.
Session
2AR. So again, if you've had lots of Guinnesses, the right numbers here are 599999. But anyway, appreciate your feedback. I like to make this better every time, and I appreciate all the words.
And if you give Dan lots of great marks, then he's a shoo-in for coming to the UK next year for the real thing. But I dare say we are going to run hybrid next year, so I dare say this could be one of the recorded sessions. But anyway, Dan deserves fabulous feedback for that. And as he mentioned, I believe he's got the closing session in the application development track next week. So if you want more, there's more.
Saving the best for last.
Definitely did. I definitely did. Notwithstanding the fact you're in a wicked time zone thing, but yeah. So you're focusing on edit macros next Thursday between 5 p.m. 6 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time. Next, I don't often promote other sessions, Dan, so this is special.
Yeah, that session will be taking it much slower and going through lots of different examples. So please tune in.
Yeah, well, thank you very much, and great session. Thanks, everyone. Enjoy the rest of GSE, and this will be available. This session will be recorded for GSE members to review at a slightly slower pace in their own time. And I think they're going to be made available after the conference closes next Thursday. So next Friday, I'm hoping that we'll have some idea of when the videos will be available. Okay, so not all is not lost. It's all going to be there. And I think the slides, if Dan publishes them, would be available with all the cheat sheets.
I put them up last night, so they should be available right now.
Let me just double check then. Yes, they are. So that all the deck is available for download off of the GSE agenda site. Brilliant. Thank you very much, Dan.
All right, very good. We'll see you next week.
Thank you. Au revoir.
Bye now.